Hello, my name is PC Walker, and you are here for the workshop that is called The Role of Disorientation in Leadership. So hopefully you're in the right space and in the right spot. And in a few minutes, I'm going to go through some things, and then we will have some good time for Q&A and some conversation afterwards. But I would first want to introduce myself real quickly. Again, my name is PC Walker. I am in residence life at William Jessup University, which is just outside of Sacramento, California. I've been working in student affairs, student development, or at least student ministry for almost 20 years now. I am either working in college student life, in res life, or I have been a college and young adult pastor for a long time. Or if I'm not doing one of those two things, then I'm working with men and women in crisis and in transitional programs that I've worked in before. So that's just a little bit about me. I am married 18 years and met my wife in college, which I will talk a little bit about the college that I went to. But we have 2 kids and we all live on campus, and it is pretty incredible to have the opportunity to live on campus and to watch my kids grow up on campus. So before I get started, I am going to tell you a story about something that I went through, something that happened to me when I was a student, when I was a student in college. And then after the story, I'll jump into a little bit more of what we want to cover at this time. So the story goes as this. I'm 19 years old, grew up in Indiana, and went to college in Indiana my sophomore year of college. And I went to The university is called Anderson University. Some of you may even go to Anderson University. So I'm an Anderson University alumni. But at the time of the story, I'm a 19-year-old student and a sophomore, and I'm taking Introduction to Christian Ministry. Now, this is just a basic course. It's fulfilling liberal arts requirements, but it's also, if you are in the Christian ministry department, it's still your first course that you have to take, and you have to take Intro to Christian Ministry. One thing about this course is that it closes with a class trip to Chicago, and you spend the weekend in Chicago. And on Friday of this course, of this trip, you drive to Chicago and you spend the night in the rescue mission. And on one of the floors of the rescue mission, out of the several stories that's there, is designed just for guests. And so we're all sleeping and staying in the south side of Chicago, which is historically the bad part of Chicago. And we are sleeping in the rescue mission. And then Saturday morning, we all get up and we all get into the 16-passenger van, and our professor begins to take us to all kinds of ministries throughout the entire Chicagoland area. And we are just there to take tours, get there, get information about different kind of ministries that happen there in Chicago. And I want to tell you about two of them that I remember very, very well. The first one is that we were at this little ministry. It was a residential ministry for male prostitutes who were trying to get out of that business. And I, again, am a 19-year-old kid from the middle of nowhere, Indiana, grew up in Indiana. And this is the first time that I've ever even realized that men could be prostitutes. Everything I'd ever known about prostitution is Pretty Woman or whatever else you picture in that call girl in the movies. And so I had no idea that that was the case, but I'm also learning in that same moment that you can do a ministry for anything. Anything that matters enough to you, that matters deeply enough for you, you could create a ministry for. Somebody had a huge heart for men who were stuck in the prostitution business and wanted to get out. Someone had such a huge heart for that they created a ministry just for that. And so I learned at that moment that you could do ministry for anything if it matters deeply enough to you. We went to another ministry, and I don't even remember what the ministry itself was, but I remember after we did our tour, my professor brought us all out into this courtyard, and he had us all circle up around a statue that was in the middle of the courtyard, and the statue was of Black Jesus. And at that moment, he had us all have a conversation together about what is it that is going inside of us and is going on inside of us at this moment that we're looking at this. What is it bringing up in each of us? What are the thoughts that are going through our head? What are the feelings? What are the emotions that are coming up as we sit here and we see something like this? And again, first time I am a 19-year-old white kid from the middle of Indiana, and this is the first time I'm seeing anything but a blue-eyed, blonde-haired Jesus. And so I have to deal with what is this thing that I'm seeing for the first time. And that whole conversation was led through this entire dialogue for us to begin to reflect on what it is we're looking at, what it is that we're seeing. And it was a transformative moment for me because it made me see something. I was experiencing something that I had never seen before. And it was actually kind of contrary to everything I'd always seen up until that moment, which was a blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus. And so now I have to see like, well, what does this mean now that I'm seeing something very different? Now, we've been talking about how this conference has the theme verse of Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. And it's this idea of shining your light to all, and to this idea when a lot of us are either Christians at a different kind of university than what we maybe went to or attended, but then I think a lot of us are on staff or student leaders at colleges that are Christian universities and Christian colleges. And This brings up a little bit of what I've been doing in my own doctoral research, which is I have found that if you look at all of the universities and all of the colleges as a part of the CCCU, which is the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, is an international organization that contain all of the Christian colleges and Christian universities, most of them. 70%, a little more than 70% of all of those universities' mission statements have something to do with transformation. They have something that promises transformative education, it promises to create transformative leaders, or we have a transformational education experience that we promise to you in our mission statement. So with 70% of the universities that many of us are attending or are working for or are graduates of, promise transformational education or transformational experiences, then we ought to know what that looks like. What does that mean? And so my question for us is, in this moment and in this workshop, my question for us is, what is your role as a student leader in helping to fulfill the mission of being transformational at the university where you attend? How do you enter into moments of transformation with the people you're leading, with the students that you're leading that fall under your leadership, the students that are on your wing, on your floor, the students who are attending your meetings or attending your programs? How are you as a student leader supposed to help fulfill the mission of being transformational? And so there are a whole lot of studies. There are numerous studies about what is transformation. Now you can see that just about anywhere you go. What is transformation, or what is transformational leadership? There are plenty of studies, and it's a fascinating thing to look at. It's fascinating work that's out there, but I'd like to give you one framework just for this time. I'm going to give you one framework for transformative leadership for you to hopefully use in real time and in real life for those that you lead and that you have an impact on and an influence for. So I'm going to offer you a brief synopsis of one theory of transformation as presented by the work of Jack Mesereau. I'm going to present to you very briefly what goes into a transformative moment that makes something possibly transformative. And we will see together then in our conversation afterwards, we'll see our conversation together. What might it be used for in our leadership and in your leadership, in whatever position you hold as a student leader? How might you use what I give to you as a tool to lead toward more transformation in the campuses that you're a part of? So as I begin to explain these things, I want you to think through any questions that pop up into your mind or into your head, and any possible thoughts that emerge for you. Maybe your thoughts are like, I have never heard it described like that before, or how do you actually do more of that? So if it's a question or a thought, or even if you're not frustrated and you don't like what I'm saying, as you come across different thoughts, different questions that surface in your mind and that emerge in your mind as I'm talking, go ahead and right now start to write those into the chat. And then when I get done with this video, we will come back together and we'll begin to discuss some of those things that are emerging for you as I talk, okay? So as I get started, I'd like you to get just a piece of paper. Now, it doesn't have to be a specifically like this kind of copy paper. If you just have a journal, if you just use a journal, or if you just have a piece of scratch paper somewhere, that's fine. But some way or another, get your piece of paper. If you can fold it twice to create 4 quadrants, then great. If you can't fold it and it's just a piece of scrap paper, then draw a box and make 4 quadrants in it. All right. And in that top left box, I want you to write these words. I want you to write disorienting dilemma. Disorienting dilemma. Much like this. Hopefully you can read my chicken scratch. My wife says it's not great. So hopefully you can read it. This idea of a disorienting dilemma in this theory of transformation, what does it look like to actually lead in a transformative way? The disorienting dilemma is the key impetus for all of transformation. Disorienting dilemmas are what happen when we come to different points in our life, and we've all come to different points in our life sometime or another. One example is my disorienting dilemma that was created in Chicago outside in a courtyard around some ministry and outside of a ministry that had this statue there. It was a disorienting dilemma because we all come to different points in our lives when uh, something I'm seeing at this moment, something I'm experiencing at this moment is completely contrary to everything I've always assumed or thought or been told up till that moment. And so I have to do something when I realize that it just looks very, very different. We all have different points of view. We have different habits of thought, habits of mind that we've all just had hardwired into our experience up to this moment that we're all in right now. There are certain thoughts, there are certain points of view that I've just always thought. And I've always viewed things the way that I do. And a disorientation comes about when we experience something that challenges those hard set views or thoughts that we've just always had. This is the 19-year-old white kid from the middle of Indiana being in South Chicago, seeing a frame of Black Jesus for the first time and having to deal with, what does that bring up in me? It's disorienting. It changes everything that I've always seen up until that moment. And those that you lead will come to those moments of disorientation at any given time, at any given moment. Those disorienting moments may come from a conversation that they have in class, and then they come back to your wing or they come back to your floor having had this conversation in class and it's stirring something up. It may come from an interaction that they actually have on your floor or in your wing or in the meeting or the program that you are putting on. So disorienting dilemmas just come about from anything. It might be a movie that they saw or a song that they heard. Somehow something was presented to them that they experienced that showed something very different than all of the thoughts and the habits of mind and perspective that they've always had up until that moment. Something about the perspective is beginning to shift, and those are disorienting moments. So, what do you do in those moments as a leader, as a student leader in those moments to help lead from what is disorienting and a disorienting dilemma to actually being a transformational experience? Transformative leaders need to know how to navigate that disorientation of those who they lead so that those moments can lead to transformation instead of discouragement. Now, in the top right box, I want you to write the word reflection. Reflection. So, just as we saw, disorienting dilemma, next box says reflection. Now, I have to recognize in this moment, if I'm experiencing a disorienting dilemma, I have to recognize that in that moment, I am discontent. There's some discomfort even in this moment because it's challenging everything that I've always held so dear about this perspective that I've always had, or this point of view that I've just always had is getting shifted. Something's different. It's challenging. So I have to recognize that discontent, acknowledge the discomfort, and then navigate from that experience of disorientation to a way that it goes to something better. Am I willing to try on these challenging thoughts in the hopes of maybe seeing what needs to shift? Whenever you go shopping for clothes, if you go shopping I remember right when I graduated, I moved out to California and I worked in retail. I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but they were really well known for their denim. And I remember working on the floor in this retail business, and people would come in and they would get 6 or 7 pairs of the same denim, of the same jean, of the same cut, and of the same size, and they would bring them back to the fitting rooms and try them all on. And they would try all of them on until they found the one that fit just right, the one that fit just perfectly. And when we come to these disorienting dilemmas, can we be willing to step into that moment with somebody and just say, well, let's try it on. This new thing that you're seeing doesn't mean you have to take it, doesn't mean you have to sit there and make this be the shift of your perspective for the rest of your life, but are you willing to sit in that moment in your reflection and try it on. Why is it so discomforting? Why is it so discontent in you inside yourself? Well, let's talk about that. Let's see why, which leads us to our bottom left quadrant, which I would like you to write the word dialogue. Dialogue. So, in that bottom quadrant, we have written the word dialogue. This is the key. Reflection and dialogue is where the good stuff is. This is where the sweet stuff is when it comes to being a leader in the moments of disorientation. Can you be a spot where you can provide reflective dialogue? This is the statement I want you to write down. I want you to remember this statement if you forget everything else. Every transformative moment includes reflective dialogue. Doesn't matter how it happened, but every transformative moment in a person's life required and included reflective dialogue. This is where we internalize what it is that we're learning and maybe even possibly unlearning. There is something good about unlearning some things as long as we're willing to reflect and to dialogue that out with another person. For your dialogue with another person who's going through a disorienting dilemma, for your dialogue to be transformational, it needs to be aware of all of the ideas that this person is learning right now, the things that they're trying on right now. Are you aware of them? If you're not, unpack them and draw them out. Tell me more about this thing that you've experienced that's challenging what you knew, challenging everything you thought. And engage with those ideas, but also engage with the ideas that they're unlearning. What are the assumptions that you had up until this moment? Like, what did you think all this other time before you had this moment? Be willing to dialogue through those, because as you begin to unpack those, that's where the good stuff is. The last one is in your last box. I'd like you to write the word application. Application, and you could even write application/action. To prove that something has become transformational, these boxes begin to be fulfilled. They don't have to be in order. Sometimes you can go back and forth. Sometimes you need to dip into more reflection right now. Sometimes you need to actually go into figuring out, what does it mean for me to apply what I've been learning or unlearning? It's important to make a move. Make a challenge to yourself. If I've come to this disorienting dilemma that's shifting everything I've thought, what changes? What changes if this is all true? What changes about my prayer life if I've now experienced at least an image of Jesus as being black versus the white Jesus I've always thought of before? So when I'm praying, what is the image in my mind? What does that shift? It also challenges the assumption of, how am I a leader on this campus, and what does it look like to be a leader on a campus where all of the posters and all of the paintings and all of the things that I put up here on our campus may actually be a picture of white Jesus? What must that be like for someone who doesn't look like me on this campus? That's a leadership question for you to wrestle with, for you to think about, for you to maybe bring up at certain points. So application and action, what should change? What might I change because of all of this? Some people have written a fifth category, which is disposition. And essentially it is the overall challenge that, can I move past this moment of transformation, this moment of disorientation, with a larger openness to critique all of the assumptions that I've always had? This is not deconstruction. I want to be very clear. We're not talking about deconstruction in this moment. I'm talking about when I have experienced something that challenges all the assumptions that I've always had, challenges the point of view that I've always had before. What am I doing with that? Am I doing that and coming to that moment with the opportunity that maybe there's a student leader around me who might actually enter into some reflective dialogue with me, so that I can begin to learn and unlearn the right things? And maybe I'm just trying it on, because really, if I just try it on, it doesn't mean I have to take it. It doesn't mean I have to go with it. It just means I'm willing to try it on, engage with it, and then move toward transformation. So that is a very brief synopsis of one framework of what does it look like to lead toward transformation. So now, let's talk about it.